and welcome back to the Boropolis Podcast. As always, I am joined with Nathan, and we have more Middlesbrough action to get our teeth into. But before we do that, Nathan, apart from the football, how are you doing? How's the last week or so gone? Obviously, in the build-up to Christmas. I don't know if you've finished for uni just yet, but yeah, it's always a nice time of the year, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I'm doing well. I've had a few assessment deadlines in the last week, but they've been hit the nail on the head. So I'm buzzing to get done for Christmas, have a little bit of time off and watch some football. And yeah, get ready for Christmas, stuff in your face and having a few drinks. So I think everyone's ready for that at this time of year, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, I mean, I don't think listeners or watchers of the podcast might know, but you have been to the darts this week as well. How was that?
Fantastic. Yeah, brilliant. Love the darts. First time I've been to Alexandra Palace. And yeah, unfortunately, I didn't quite put my plan into place, which was on them cards. You're not allowed to put football things on your cards, apparently, like
Right.
hashtags of clubs and things like that. But my plan was to draw a train and get everyone all aboard the Tuba train.
Yeah.
But it wasn't to be, unfortunately.
Yeah, that is quite sad. I didn't know about the whole train plan. That we could have maybe tried to sort of get some attention drawn to that. So it's a shame that that didn't come off. I didn't actually know about the whole like no football sort of rule now as well, which is pretty pathetic from the PDC. But yeah, just before we move on from that, obviously I know what you went dressed as. I don't know if you want to share what, I mean, I'm not sure if you made it onto the TV screens, but obviously if you didn't, I think it's only fair that you let the listeners and watchers know if they had have seen you, what they would have seen you dressed as.
Well, I actually was on Sky as well, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
quite funny. But yeah, I was in a group of lads and we all went as the Toy Story cast, and I was and I was Bullseye, the horse. So yeah, really good night. It's all part of the fun, I guess. Fancy dress, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. I'm quite disappointed I haven't seen that. So if you have the recording of that, please do send it my way, because I would quite like to see just a horse popping up on Sky Sports with your face stuck in the middle of it. Not something that you see every day on Sky Sports, but still very funny, especially in the build up to Christmas. But yeah, enough talk about Nathan dressed as a horse and obviously the darts. There was football at the weekend, Nathan, of course. The second game back following the international break from the World Cup. And it took place at Turf Moor. Last podcast, we pretty much slated what a place Burnley is. In fact, that would be a little bit harsh. Not Burnley as a place, but more so just the stadium and the fact that it's old and quite rotten, to be honest. I guess they got the last laugh, really, didn't they?
They did in the end, and it was a funny game that was a bit edgy early on, but as the game drew on, Burnley, well, proved their quality really, improved why they are top of the league. They performed really well in that second half and got the just rewards. But to start the game, Boro unchanged for what feels like the 10th game in a row, something. Pretty much every Michael Carrick game, we've been unchanged. The only change to the squad was no Matt Crooks, unfortunately. The match winner in the last two games against Norwich and Luton was left out of the squad with a knock that he suffered on at training on Thursday. So it appears that he's going to be out for the Boxing Day fixture against Wigan as well, which is unfortunate. But yeah, unchanged. And going into this game, I think it was sort of a test for Boro to see where we really are at. We've done well in the last month or so under Michael Carrick against sides that are in and around us. But this was sort of a a test to decide where we really are at against a side that are top of the league and have performed really well all season. In the early stages, I felt that we did quite well, sat in our shape and limited Burnley, let them have the ball, but just sat in and limited them going forward, really. Wasn't too much in terms of chances in that first half. The main one was a chance for Johan Berg Gudmundsson going through on goal. I kind of thought it was offside. I was at the game on Saturday and thought it was offside, but on reflection on the replays, he was not. Ryan Giles played him on, and he's tried to bend it in the near corner from a tight angle, but Steffen is there to save it with his midriff. But yeah, apart from that chance, there was sort of a little bit of a panic in stoppage time at the end of the first half as Burnley attacked us, but not a lot in terms of Middlesbrough chances either. Of course, sat in our shape. Our aim was to counter-attack when possible, and there wasn't all too many opportunities. There was maybe one in that first half where Riley McGree picked up the ball and he had options left and right. He had Force to his left and he had Jones and Tuber to his right. And instead of going left, which I think a lot of the fans in that away end were sort of hoping that he would go because it looked like the better option, he opted to go right and it came to nothing, unfortunately. But to go in at half-time 0-0, I was quite pleased with that in the stand. Of course, you watched the game on TV, Chris. What did you make of that first half?
Yeah, like you say, very much the same for me. Pleased with the way that we were dealing with Burnley. There was times where we were inviting a little bit of pressure on, but I never felt we were too, under the cosh. And, even going into the game, we knew it was going to be a very difficult test. And it was interesting. Obviously, we haven't faced Burnley up until this point in the season. And, although some, and probably a large majority of Middlesbrough fans will have been fully aware that the Burnley that we were going to play at Turf Moor was going to be different to the sort of stereotypical Burnley. I actually felt our performance in the first half sort of managed to nullify everything that they've been good at this season, really. As I say, I never really felt too terrified. You mentioned the Gudmundsson chance. I thought it was a mile, and then, as you say, it actually turns out Giles has played him on. But apart from that one, I must say, I thought, although we didn't attack very much, you mentioned the one where McGree just picks the wrong ball in the end. We limited them to one major chance really, and especially away from home, I was definitely pleased to be going in at 0-0.
Yeah, and then a change at half time as well. Marcus Force left the pitch and Duncan Watmore came on, and talk about an impact substitution. 48 minutes on the clock, Boro go 1-0 up, and it was a goal that was literally out of nothing. A ball that goes sort of astray from Burnley, tried to be kept in by Manuel Benson, and he's tried to keep it in, but probably in the worst possible way I've ever seen. He's launched the ball 20 yards over the heads of his back four, and Watmore's on that last line of defence, anticipates it well, gets him behind, and he's running through on goal, and he just slides it in that near post of Murich's goal, and Boro were 1-0 up. Sort of against the run of play to a point. Burnley did have the opening stages of possession in that second half, and to go 1-0 up was pleasing. But from my point of view, as a fan in the stand of that away end at Turf Moor, I did know and kind of expect that Burnley were going to come out after that, following that, and it'd almost be a bit of a wake-up call for them, and that they would fly out the traps quickly. And if they did get one goal back relatively quickly, they probably would go on to get that sort of one to get them in front as well. But yeah, Duncan Watmore finishes it. What did you make of his finish, Chris?
Yeah, I thought it was actually a terrific finish. And, we've seen over the years Duncan Watmore miss a handful of, quite, I don't want to say easy because, if I put myself in that position, who knows, I could potentially do even worse than Duncan Watmore. And I probably would, to be totally honest with you. But he sort of, towards the back end of last season, almost developed a bit of a reputation for missing these sort of easy chances and scoring the more difficult ones. And he almost made his goal look like an easy chance, and it wasn't at all. It was a great first touch just to take him a little bit closer towards the Burnley goal, and then he, as calm as you like, just rolls it past Murrock in the Burnley goal, and he stands no chance. And immediate impact, and it would have been interesting, and I'm sure Marcus Forss was very annoyed because he spent the first half sort of chasing loose balls and not really getting involved, and then he gets taken off, and the striker in this situation, Duncan Watmore, his replacement at halftime, gets the sort of chance that Marcus Forss has been crying out for, really. But yeah, I guess Duncan Watmore's job was to put the ball in the back of the net, and he did that, and as I say, made that immediate impact. But yeah, like you've mentioned, you almost felt like that goal sort of poked the bear a little bit in Burnley and woke them up, and you always felt like they were going to then come back with even more almost, and sort of, as you say, I didn't want to ever be in a position where I'm expecting the other team to score, but I always felt like if they didn't score, they'd have very good chances and they'd put us under a lot of pressure. And actually, the man that gifts us our opener is the man which then terrorizes us to put his team back in the lead. Two pieces of brilliance from him, and yeah, it was a difficult day for Ryan Giles on that left, trying to deal with Benson.
Yeah, it was. But just before that, Tuba had a possible penalty appeal turned down in the stand. If you've ever been to Turf Moor, everyone listening to this, you'll know that the view from the away end is quite poor at times. You can't really see the goal, first of all, because you're not steep enough. I don't think you're sort of thrown back into the stand, but not steep enough, so you can't see the byline. But yeah, my vision was slightly impaired, and I couldn't see if Tuba was in the Burnley penalty area or not. But it looked to me like it was a blatant foul from Bayer, who tackles Tuba, doesn't win the ball, just kicks him, and the referee waved it away. As I've seen the replay, I know now that it was committed outside of the box, but to see no foul given for that was incredibly poor. But as you say, Chris, Burnley were going to come out after conceding that goal, and it was that man, Manuel Benson, who sort of turned the game on its head single-handedly, pretty much. And his first goal was, it's an outstanding finish, really. Gets that ball on that right-hand side. He's isolated Ryan Giles, and I think Benson's a player where, even though you know what he's got to try and do, which is come in on that left foot and either get a shot off or put a cross into the box, it's very difficult to stop him because of his body movements that are showing that he's going to go down the line. But yeah, he isolates Giles on that left-hand side, and yeah, he shows Giles inside, and yeah, it's a brilliant finish into the near post, and it pulls the game level. The only sort of grievance that I do have with that is how easily Burnley did isolate Benson on that side with Giles. We know as well as anyone that Ryan Giles isn't really your out and out left back like a George Friend possibly would have been a few years ago. and defensively, it's not his best attribute. But my frustration is that there isn't a midfielder in there alongside him that is covering his inside. You watching the replay, Riley McGree's sort of jogging back into position. I feel that he should possibly be in there, tucking in, helping Ryan Giles down that side from probably Burnley's best and most influential player in Benson. But yeah, he gets them back into that game, and then very quickly gets them in the lead of the game as well. Again, Burnley attacking down their right-hand side with Benson, and it looks like nothing's going to really come of this. Benson has the ball at his feet, and this time McGree has tucked in, helped Giles, and they both stood there sort of anticipating what Benson's going to do. And Benson stood there, sort of just flicks across into an area, and it evades Jay Rodriguez, who's the man that he's intending to hit. It takes that bounce in the 6-yard box, and it carries all the way through, clips off the far post and into Zack Steffen's net. And Boro then on, from then on, it was always going to be an uphill battle to get anything from that game. But there's been a lot of talk since the Burnley game and since full time and since that goal went in, pretty much, about Zack Steffen and his possible impact on that goal and the possibility of him saving that. A lot of fans feel that he should save that. What was your take on it, Chris?
Yeah. Just before we, my throat really is going. Just before we go into the Steffen debate, which I know a lot of our actual listener questions wanted to know about anyway. So instead of sort of doing it in listener questions, we can go on with very shortly. But just as you say, disappointing in terms of both of those goals that, firstly, everyone knows what Benson wants to do every time he gets the ball. And although sometimes he'll go down the flank and try and whip one in with his weaker foot, I think a few of the times that he did do that, he pretty much kicked it out for a goal kick. There's certainly a weakness there, or certainly it's not as strong as his left foot, which is, a given. So it was disappointing not for Ryan Giles to show him outside the first time, and then the second time where he's allowed to float that cross in with his left foot, obviously giving him the angle to, if no one does get that final touch, it's always going to be heading towards Zack Steffen's back post anyway. So, yeah, from a defensive point of view, dreadful goals to concede. And it was pretty much Burnley's game plan all afternoon, just hit Benson, and it was disappointing to see the fact that, although he gave us an assist, he also had a massive deciding factor in the game for Burnley. And I think Ryan Giles will know as well as anyone that what he should be doing, he should be showing him outside and not allowing him to cut inside. But as you say, you see players like Mo Salah, and I'm not saying he's on the same level as him. Ian Robben played off the right for years and still managed to score the same goal every week, cutting in on his left. And in fairness, Benson, his body movements, his body shape and his dribbling ability is really impressive. And to be fair, if Burnley don't go up this season, I could see Benson, moving on, because he really, really did impress me on Saturday. But onto Steffen, as you did ask. I actually, perhaps surprisingly, because, Middlesbrough haven't really been fortunate, especially since we've done this podcast in terms of goalkeepers. Obviously, we had Joe Lumley and Luke Daniels. Liam Roberts come in for a spell this season and did okay. But I actually feel that the criticism towards Zack Steffen is somewhat harsh. I don't know how you feel about that. I feel the second goal, his positioning's not fantastic. The first one, I even saw some complaints that he was beating at his near post, but I just think it's a good strike, in fairness. I'd look at the first goal as more of a defensive problem as towards a goalkeeper issue. Yes, perhaps Steffen should maybe have taken that extra step towards his right with the anticipation of that ball coming in and curving towards his back post. But I think you're picking up on minor details there. And although the goals didn't cover in glory at all, I actually was not concerned, but I more looked towards some of his body language and just his relaxed nature. I think we know that he has that now, and it's not going to go away. But even against Luton, we saw the incident where he takes too long to kick it and then kick off a Luton player into the back of our goal. And sometimes I just think that he's almost too relaxed, and I know that's just his play style, and he's his parent club. Goalkeepers are almost expected to be like that, but I just don't want to see the sort of Zack Steffen of the Chris Wilder era creep back in, where he was doing these things quite consistently, because up until Saturday, throughout Carrick's full tenure, really, he's been really, really stepping up his game and showing why he's at Man City and showing why everyone was so excited by his signing, obviously in the summer. So, yeah, I think that some of the criticism's a little bit undeserved. I do think that he needs to maybe sharpen up in certain areas and be a little bit quicker in terms of his kicking when he's being pressed by forwards. But, yeah, I'm not going to lie. I think calls for him to be dropped for Boxing Day and things like that are far too soon.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. It always sort of gets on my nerves, the calls when a goalkeeper is beating at his near post that there shouldn't be, because I think, well, a player can smash it in any corner and he's got to cover the full goal. He doesn't have to just cover his near post. So that's always a frustration from me. Benson could whip that one in that far corner and people would still make sort of judgments on Steffen's positioning. And that's that second goal. Yeah, okay. I think initially I was quite frustrated to see that ball go all the way through, but yeah, I'm not sure he can do all too much about it. He is stood there anticipating a header from either Rodriguez or a deflection from one of our defenders to go goal bound. And unfortunately, it's curved all the way in. My frustration is possibly the third goal, which comes from a corner. The corner's an in-swinging corner, and it's going to that near post. And yeah, the aim is to defend it. And Johnny Howson's tried to flick that ball on, and unfortunately, he's flicked the ball past everyone and into the corner of his own goal. But my frustration would be with Steffen coming to get balls from corners every time. I think his judgment just needs to be a bit more conservative rather than so aggressive every time. I think that he possibly just needs to sort of limit coming out every single time. I don't mind it every so often when the ball is there for him to be won, but he's going into a crowd of bodies there, and he was never going to win that ball on Saturday afternoon. And I said at 2-1 Burnley, it was always going to be difficult for Boro to get back into the game, but at 3-1 the game was well and truly dead and buried, even after later on in the game a red card and a penalty to Boro in stoppage time at the end of that game, which I suppose we'll get onto now with the sort of action in that. Well, the action following that third Burnley goal, there wasn't much that went on. So penalty action. The ball ends up floating down towards Burnley's goal. Chuba Akpom's 3 or 4 yards out from goal. Murich is at the penalty spot, and there's Burnley defenders on the line trying to cover. The ball's dropping down, and you slowly start to see ex-Boro player Connor Roberts' hand start to rise into the air and make a forward motion towards the ball. You see the ball move forward as it drops just below the crossbar, and the roar from the away end is handball, because that's what the action looked like from the away end. And after what felt like an eternity for the referee to decide what he had just seen, he eventually points to the spot, looks at his linesman. I'm pretty sure his linesman must have just shrugged at him, because I don't think he had a clue what went on either. But the replays do show that despite Connor Roberts trying his best to play volleyball, he doesn't actually handle the ball. It hits the crossbar, and Burnley were going to get away with a bit of a Boro effort. But Connor Roberts eventually, I did see after the game, BBC Tees had tweeted that he was immediately dismissed. I think it was anything but immediate. It took about 10 minutes for the referee to give the pen, and then send Connor Roberts off. But he did walk in the end, and Chuba stepped up for the penalty in front of the away end in the 92nd minute of 6 added on, 3-1 down. And he puts it to the keeper's right in that bottom corner. But Murich is equal to it, gets down low, saves it, grabs hold of it, and it summed up a very, very difficult afternoon for Boro at Turf Moor. What did you make of Chuba's penalty, Chris?
Yeah, do you know what? Honestly, I don't know if it was just Harry Kane scarring me for life, but considering, Chuba's been in fine form and has scored penalties already this season, as soon as he had the ball in his hands, and I know it sounds easy for me to say this, and you'll probably think, well, anyone could say that, I knew he was going to miss. And I actually think there is a more sort of deeper issue surrounding this, and I guess it sort of ties in with the fact it took so long. I always feel when a penalty taker has that long to decide, and especially because Akpom had picked the ball up quite early, Murray had the chance to get in his head. The Burnley players had the chance to have a few words. He was standing. It must have been approaching the 3 or 4 minute mark by the time he actually runs up to take the penalty. And I just feel like that amount of time, sometimes it just becomes too much, and, the penalty taker might change their mind. Okay, yes, Chuba's in fine form, and, one penalty miss doesn't mean that he's a bad player or a bad penalty taker all of a sudden. But yeah, I wasn't confident at all, and it wasn't a convincing penalty. He didn't really put much behind it. Didn't really disguise where he wanted to put the ball very well. And yeah, as you say, it just capped off a disappointing but difficult afternoon. And yes, it's not the end of the world, but it certainly would have been interesting to see how those last few minutes would have gone if Chuba had stuck that away.
Yeah, and I think this game was exactly what we said it was at the start of the game. It was a test to see where we are at. And I think that in spells we looked okay against a side that have been, well, fantastic so far this season. They're top of the league for a reason. They play really good football, kept the ball well, and in the first half, we did extremely well to stay in our shape, limit them to not a lot of chances in that first half. But I think in that second half, the momentum started swinging in their favour a little bit, with chances going their way, and they worked their chances really well to switch the ball out wide to their left-hand side in order to isolate Benson on the other side, quickly switch it over to that other side, and then Benson has a free run at Ryan Giles. It was the play in that sense, kind of like we did under Chris Wilder last year with Isaiah Jones switching it left and then isolating their winger on that other side to get a run on the fullback. But yeah, I think a defeat away from home at the league leaders isn't the worst and most worrying thing to think about for Middlesbrough at this moment in time. I think, okay, we were unfortunate in some moments. It raised some questions in some moments. But on the whole, I wasn't overly disappointed with our performance on Saturday afternoon. I thought that we did okay, and in the end, Burnley's quality just shone that little bit brighter.
Yeah, I think my only other real sort of gripe about the game, I guess, was, we've proven under Michael Carrick that we're a good team and we can cause teams problems. And okay, yes, we didn't do it a lot, but we caused Burnley some problems. And I just felt, especially after we scored, we almost retreated a little bit and showed Burnley a little bit too much respect. And I don't know whether that's just because of the position that we've sort of come from in this season, given that, only a few weeks back or a few months probably now, we were, looking over our shoulders and being really concerned about what position we were finding ourselves in. And the fact that Burnley have pretty much from day dot this season been up there challenging for those top two spots. And yeah, I just felt like we could have been a little bit more aggressive. We could have, tried to get in their faces a little bit more when we did take the lead and stop them sort of doing what they wanted to do. But, as you say, I think the game plan probably always was going to be nick a goal and see where we can go from that point. So I can understand, what we tried to do. And, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I guess, as you say, it was decided by a few of Burnley's players shining a little bit brighter than ours, and especially Benson. And yeah, I think he's a real top player. And as I say, if Burnley don't go up, which in fairness, I think they will do. I think they're as good as up, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think Benson will be a star for them or a star for someone else. And it is quite funny that actually they were without Teller, and actually I don't think Benson's been a consistent starter for them this season. I know he's got a good record, but he seems to come off the bench an awful lot. So yeah, it just so happened he had that performance to shine, and I'm not sure he'll be back on the bench anytime soon after that. But yeah, as I say, disappointing that we couldn't hold on for a little bit longer and be a little bit more aggressive. But not the end of the world by any stretch. Just before we move on to Wigan, Nathan, I know I mentioned it and we sort of did cover it. All of the questions following the game was about Zack Steffen, Liam Roberts. I know BBC T's tweeted out who should start on Boxing Day, and they got a little bit of grief for that. And yeah, I've already made my opinions clear. I think you kind of also did say the same, but for me, there's absolutely no chance that Michael Carrick will sort of bow in and be reactionary and takes Zack Steffen out of the team. I think he just needs to stop being so erratic, really. And also, I guess one thing that perhaps hasn't been mentioned, it may well be a factor in some of these little lapses in concentration or a loss of confidence is, he's fresh off the back of seeing his national team go to a World Cup, take points off England, progress out of the group stages. And for the majority of that qualifying campaign, he was in the team. We obviously saw the article in the Athletic a few weeks back that he was struggling with his mental health going into the last qualifiers before the actual tournament, and that's why he withdrew from the USA team. And there may still be a little bit of a overhang, I guess, of disappointment and sort of a loss of confidence, because for someone that plays for Man City and had played for USA an awful lot, I think you've got to sort of look at it from a human point of view and think, well, his confidence probably has taken somewhat of more than somewhat, quite a huge knock, to be honest. And it's about rebuilding that and showing what he was doing up until really this Burnley game.
Yeah, of course it is. And you've just got to hope that the fans sort of get off his back a little bit and just give him the backing. In an ideal world, fans wouldn't criticise their own players for every possible mistake that they make. But that's just the nature of the sport, unfortunately. And mistakes do incite reactions from fans, and people have sort of seen the goals that went in on Saturday, and some have got the view that those goals are partly Zack Steffen's fault. And yeah, I think the hope for me is that he sort of recovers from the backlash that he's received and puts in a 10 out of 10 performance against Wigan and keeps a clean sheet and Boro get a win. And that continues on into the Christmas period and the New Year as well. So yeah, just to sort of finish up on the Burnley aspect of the podcast, the results on Saturday sort of went in our favour as well in terms of the league. The sides around us didn't really pick up that many points, and if they did, there were draws. So Boro were 12th at the start of this game week, but with Birmingham's win against Reading on Friday night, we dropped to 13th ahead of Saturday's games. So Boro remain 13th for Christmas, 4 points off the playoff places, which we are in and around that pack now, which is good to see. Hopefully we won't be looking over our shoulder too much. Hopefully the wins keep rolling in, and a defeat to Burnley is hopefully just a blip along the road for Michael Carrick's men.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it's an awful lot better losing the game and sort of almost looking ahead and thinking, oh, well, what are the other teams ahead of us done? Are we still within that pack? And we certainly are, as you say, 4 points off the playoffs. Going into Christmas, if you'd have said that to me before Michael Carrick took over, I honestly would have called you an absolute mentalist. It just goes to show what a turnaround we've had. And even against Burnley, I know I've just said there that I was disappointed we showed them too much respect, but actually, from the team that conceded last kick of the game against Preston to that team that, lost against Burnley, it just goes to show how much things have shifted, really, because I come away from the Burnley game thinking, well, there were still signs. Burnley are a good team, but I fully believe that we are as well, and I think we'd cause most teams in this division problems now. One team, I guess, that we will be hoping to cause problems, Nathan, is Wigan Athletic. Of course, they will be travelling to the Riverside on Boxing Day. There's nothing quite like a Boxing Day at the Riverside. You sort of, from about 5 o'clock onwards on Christmas Day, it's sort of in your mind already. I mean, for some people, it might even be earlier. But yeah, it's always a good occasion, always a good crowd. And obviously we now know there's few tickets remaining, actually. So it's going to be a bumper one at the Riverside. Obviously, Wigan do have a new manager. They come off the back of a defeat to Sheffield United under the control of Kolo Toure, which feels really bizarre for me to say, but I think it's fair to say that we're probably going to be playing against a different Wigan Athletic to the one that Leo's Middlesbrough team turned over 4-1 earlier on this season.
Yeah, I think there will be a different side. I think that there'll be possibly a little bit more well drilled. Of course, the Colo's only been there for 2 games so far. Sheffield United is a difficult test in this division. They're flying high, second in the league, so that was always going to be a difficult test. But in his first game, Wigan travelled to the Den, which is as tough as it gets as an away fixture in the Championship. And they got a point, came out with a point away at the Den. And I think as a Wigan fan, and you'd be massively pleased with that. But as a neutral as well, looking at that result, you think, well, there must be a bit more resolute, more difficult to break down, and just have a little bit of fight in them. So it's going to be a very difficult test, I think. I think that Wigan are going to come here and try and sit in, try and nick a goal. If they do nick a goal, see where it gets them. But I think the onus is on us. We have to come out. We have to sort of put ourselves about and push our game onto them, and hopefully we break them down early on, and hopefully it's a comfortable afternoon at the office, because I think the quicker it goes on without Middlesbrough breaking them down, I don't think there will be frustration from the stands. I think it will be the fans pushing us on, but it gets more difficult as the game goes on. We've watched games like this in the Championship for many a year now, and they can be boring, they can be frustrating, but it's what the Championship's all about, and hopefully Boro come out on the right side of the result.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just lastly on Wigan, obviously, in terms of personnel, I think we'll probably see one change at least. I'd expect that Duncan Watmore will probably come in for Marcus Force, given that he come off the bench and scored. I know you said earlier it's sort of unclear whether Crooks will be fit or not for Boxing Day. But yeah, I'd expect to see Watmore come in place of Force. But who knows? I know Michael Carrick's very loyal to his players, so that might not even be the case. But yeah, I guess that sort of leaves us just finally to say, well, this is the last game before Christmas, Nathan. The last podcast, sorry, I should say. So I guess it's time for your famous Christmas message. I've just called it famous. I'm not sure if it is. I can't even remember if we did this last year on the podcast or not, but I feel like we probably should have if we didn't. But yeah, Nathan, if you'd like to say anything to the listeners or viewers before Christmas, I will as well. The floor's yours.
Yeah, although we haven't quite touched the new year as of yet, thanks to everyone for the last year listening to the podcast, watching the podcast. However, you get your sort of intake of me and Chris waffling rubbish about Boro years. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening and watching over the last year so far, and hope everyone has a fantastic Christmas, topped off with 3 points on Boxing Day.
Yeah, absolutely. Same goes for me. Obviously, I'm trying to think if we will have another podcast before New Year. We may well do, actually. So I guess we could do a Christmas and a double header of a Christmas message and a message going into the new year, which I'm sure everyone is dying to hear, Nathan. But yeah, as you say, in terms of this year, the sport's been brilliant. The numbers seem to continue to grow. So hopefully we aren't boring people too much. And yeah, thank you ever so much, even just for engaging with us on Twitter and things like that. And obviously we've had a couple of guests on this year. We'll try and ensure that we get more on next year, get some exciting announcements and that sort of thing sorted out. But yes, from me, Nathan, as always, thank you ever so much for watching and listening. If you've watched or listened, whether that be on YouTube or any of your podcast providers, please do subscribe and give us a kind rating. It would make our Christmas, if that's not too cliche. Dear me, excuse me. I've been trying to mute my coughs throughout, and I've just been caught out by one with about a minute left of this podcast. But yeah, I'll stop talking now because I'll probably have a coughing fit in a second anyway. But yes, thank you ever so much for watching and listening. And that's been another episode of the Boropolis Podcast.